Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk, the podcast presented by The Courier. My name is David, your co-host. I'm the managing editor here at The Courier, and then I'm here with...
Soul. I am your other co-host, also lifestyle editor at The Courier. And we have a guest today, Machu.
Hey, I'm Machu. I'm a staff writer here. I'm new. Yeah.
We love new staff writers.
Yeah.
Excited to have Machu here today.
Yeah. Excited to be here.
Good. Love that. We're going to talk about fentanyl.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about fentanyl, the fentanyl crisis, why the hell it's so bad, and what PCC is or is not doing about it. So let's talk a little bit about that. How did this topic come up for you guys? Like, what was the deal?
So I was reading a story about 2 weekends ago now where it was in the Bronx and it was at a daycare, and these 2 people were getting sued for accidentally exposing a 1-year-old to fentanyl who died. And so I remember reading that and just being like, what the, like, because I guess when fentanyl I usually associate with like friends of friends who like know people who've like, you know, accidentally OD'd from it or anything like that. So I kind of wanted to get more in depth with it and just talk about how like it keeps coming back and it doesn't like fully go away. It's always like in waves, and kind of like what the article we're going to talk about today as well, like the 4th wave of fentanyl. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And yeah, how did you get like, I guess, interested in it? Because I know you like done like your own research in the past.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, it's always like you just find an article online about it. It's, you know, I feel like a lot of news organizations like reporting on it because it's kind of a novel thing for a lot of people. But it really isn't new. Like, if you think about it, it's been around for a few years now.
Cool.
Yeah, and I was trying to write articles about it in high school. I could never figure out how I wanted to write it. We tried doing a documentary that just fell through, and it was just, you know, I think it's a topic that I wanted to talk about that I haven't really gotten a chance to dip into.
Yeah.
That was a good time.
Yeah.
That was a perfect time. I feel like it's like, yeah, like you said, like it's been around for a minute, but there's always like, I don't know, every like week and a half or couple weeks I'll hear like it's headlining again.
Oh
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
it comes back. It's
I mean,
always...
Halloween's right around the corner.
Exactly.
Too,
Right.
Last year.
That's always like a scare
Right.
where it's like, oh, fentanyl's gonna be your kid's candy. And
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I think with that's a little bit more like, you know, the like legitimacy of like claims like that is a little bit shaky, but I'm sure there's actual like instances.
There's still
where
the
that's
fear,
happened. Yeah,
you know,
sure.
the fear of it, which has been caused by how much it's been headlining and just like how it always just seems to come back ever since its takeoff. I'm not really sure. I feel like it was maybe around like 2018 that we really started to get like, oh shit, this is bad, or like this is a thing.
Yeah, but I think like around that time, what was that one with the gas? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, where like a bunch of like younger people were doing it.
Oh, the balloons and shit.
Not the balloons, but like it was like, like almost like you'd breathe in the gas, and that would get you like the high.
I don't know. That's been around for a while. I know people do like the whippets, or like the aerosol like cans, or computer cleaners, like the keyboard cleaners.
Oh yeah. But anyway, I was bringing that up though because like I feel like that was like it kind of crept up. I feel like it was there, but then it didn't become like a prominent thing until like, I don't know, only like a few years ago. I feel like and then maybe that was just because like, you know, it started more affecting like teens and stuff like that, so that's why I started hearing about it.
That's true. And I think we should also like recognize that fentanyl is not it has not always been an illegal drug. Like it is used medically and can be prescribed, you know, by a doctor for pain relief.
It's not very common to be used.
Right.
It's a very strong painkiller.
Yeah. So in like doses, right?
In very, very small doses.
Sure. Yeah. And that's the reason why it's become like this illegal like view that it's always illegal every time you hear about it, is because it's usually mixed with other like drugs or narcotics that people consume that are illegal drugs, like cocaine or like heroin, you know, like that's where it's in.
I think on that topic though, like in the past few years, because of this whole fentanyl crisis, I think people have started realizing now that it actually is used medically. Like, I don't think people actually knew that.
Right,
until very recently.
Exactly, yeah. I feel like the awareness, like, That's why I thought it was important to like mention that too, because a lot of people just think fentanyl is like heroin or like cocaine, like you know, it's something illegal, but like it hasn't always been that way. It was, or it is still is, legally able to use if you're prescribed from a doctor to use it. But it is when you start, you know, it's when it's synthetic and it's starting to dip into those other narcotics and people consume those, that's when it becomes like illegal, you know?
Yeah, so I don't remember, it was a documentary I was watching, I don't remember the name of it, but they were talking about how a lot of these, like, other kinds of narcotics, they're being sold to people without the knowledge that it is laced with fentanyl, and that's why it becomes such a big issue.
Yeah. I've heard, I think more often than not, a lot of the overdoses that have happened are unintentional. Like, it's not like they know they're consuming this.
I think it's almost always unintentional. Because I don't think anyone recreationally takes fentanyl.
Right, yeah. And especially, like, I don't know, I feel like, just in, like in the party scene, especially in LA, like, all of Southern California is, like, all the party goers and stuff, it has become, like, the talk of, a lot of, you know, when you hang out with friends like that, it comes up in conversation a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's just so frequent. You see it happen so often, and it's really sad, but it is more often than not, like, something that is probably closer to you than you think, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good segue to, like, talk about, like, our own experiences with, like, anyone we know, or, like, you know, if we've ever, like, even seen it, like, an OD happen before. So, like, I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, have you guys ever had, like, an experience like that, or?
I have. I know you have.
Yeah. Like, I think I mentioned, or I guess I didn't. At work, we've had a few people, like, 2 people OD in our lobby that we've had to deal with. But obviously none of us are Narcan trained, so it wasn't great.
Not baristas, right?
No.
Oh,
no baristas. Not even customers. It was some unhoused folk that had come in to our lobby asking for help.
Gotcha. Shit.
Yeah.
Damn, that's crazy. Yeah, I do have my own experiences, like, dealing or witnessing and, like, having to assist in an overdose, like, as it's happening. But in the topic of, like, work, there was some person who came in the other day, and she kind of, like, passed by a customer who was ordering at the register, and she, like, threw, like, a powder substance on this girl. She was, like, she was not all there. So she was kind of, like, talking to the wall and, like, yelling and saying, like, some really out-of-pocket shit, and then she passed by this girl and threw, like, this powder on her, and we all were like, do not touch it, like, don't move. We immediately called the cops, because they're like, this could be fentanyl, like, you literally don't know.
I could even be anthrax. I mean,
don't know. And this girl was, like, super scared. She's like, I don't know what the hell this is. Like, we called the cops, and sure enough, it was, like, sugar or something, I don't know, some type of, like, sugar. But like, you just never know, you know, and like, I feel like with that, there should be more, like, training also in, like, the workplace. Which we'll get into more, I think, when we talk about the PCC involvement.
I mean, I guess because it's, like, with Narcan, it's, like, a recent thing. Like, we were just covering it on the podcast, like, before, and, like, we did a whole video about how to administer Narcan with Kat, that was a really great video. But yeah, I think it's that, and maybe, I don't know if, like, you guys have observed it, but, like, I don't know if it's, like, with Narcan being there, and it's like, oh, well, at least, like, as long as someone, like, in the area has, like, Narcan, it's like, maybe, like, do you think, like, the fear of, like, ODing is, like, lessened, you know?
I think, if it's something that is more readily available, I think so. I know that LAUSD, at least, all their campuses now have Narcan on hand.
That's awesome.
But I don't know what PCC is doing about that.
I mean, what was the last thing that they had said about, like, doing or, you know, administering? It was just, like, teaching, like, professors?
It was that they would provide, like, a Narcan training to all faculty at PCC. I don't know how updated they are on that, or if they've even started. I'm not entirely sure, but we did publish this article pretty recently. It was not too long ago that Kat wrote the article.
Mm.
Amazing article, by the way. And, you know, they did go around and get information about what PCC was doing to, you know, for harm reduction resources on campus. And there wasn't that many. Like, based off the article that she wrote, it didn't seem like there was a lot of direction that was PCC was going in terms of, like, harm reduction resources. They have so many others, but not, like, harm reduction.
More just like an acknowledgement? Like,
yeah,
okay.
Right. And so I know that I think there was a part in the article where they had spoke to someone who stated that PCC was going to move forward in implementing trainings for Narcan for faculty. I don't know, like, how, you know, how much they've done on that.
Yeah.
But we absolutely need it, especially, I think even more so in college campuses. Whether it's community college or university, it doesn't matter. Like, I feel like that a lot of the age group that is on a college campus is even more exposed to like something like that, you know.
I mean, that's a good point with colleges. I mean, maybe I don't know about community colleges because, like you said, with like it's more. I mean, is it accurate to say it's more like a younger thing that happens, or I mean, it could happen to anyone, but
I think it is definitely the college age range though, from like 18 to 22 maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely very big.
Yeah.
On campuses.
It's just the party scene. Like like really hammering on that is like. You see it more like when you go out to like bars or like clubs, like that is such a thing. Like it really is. In my going back to like the personal experience thing, I've literally had to like help rush someone to a tent to give them Narcan as they were having a freaking freak like accident basically. And it was at a club, like it was just at a EDM show, and I was like, what the?
Oh, because you could administer Narcan, right?
Yeah, and so recently too, like I was telling them I came back from like a camping like 4-day like rave thing, and that Insomniac, which is like the organizer of like EDC and like Countdown, like all the big giant raves, they partnered up with the End Overdose campaign, and they basically have like tents there now where you can go and get free certification to administer Narcan.
That is really cool.
So I did it. I was like, you know what, guys, like we see it so often, you know, and I've literally seen it happen where like people just flop next to me, and I'm like, at first like I would freak out. I'm like, what's going on, you know? And that's when I would call like the ambulance, or there's always like paramedics walking around and stuff. But it's just it's good to know how to use it if you have it. A lot of people I feel like might have access to it and not really understand how to use it in that moment, you know. But I hope UCC like moves forward with that. I feel like it's really important. Yeah,
I mean, unfortunately, it's not even just. I mean, because I think with like more of like a rave, like you said, there's like always paramedics like always there. But like I was telling you too, but I had a friend who was at like a venue, but like it was a legal venue, just like at like a random spot, right? And she was like with a friend, and she was like telling me that like some guy just started ODing on fentanyl, and it was a combination, but yeah, it was the fentanyl that was the deadly part. And so like because it was illegal, first they had to call the ambulance, but because it was illegal, they had to scram. So then it's like the only people that are left is like the dude who's like doing it, and then maybe like a few of his friends or whatever.
Wow.
So it's just like, you know, and then but luckily they had Narcan, so they were able to like administer that, and like he was fine. But yeah, it was just like I think that's the danger, is like what happens in like uncontrolled environments where you can't really, you know, you don't know like when the ambulance is gonna come, or like if someone's even gonna have Narcan on hand.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
like I know at any like Insomniac events, they have a policy of like if someone comes to a paramedic or like an EMT or whatever looking for help that has to do with like an illegal substance, they cannot like rat you out basically. They cannot report you guys or your group to like officials. They can't. If you're looking for help, like medical attention, they have to give it to you, and they're not allowed to like tell on you basically, which is pretty cool.
I think that's very important though, because you hear about all these like fentanyl overdoses and things like that, but then you also remember that in a lot of these situations, a lot of these people felt like they couldn't reach out for help when they were having an emergency, because it puts them at risk of being arrested or anything like that for being
yeah. I mean, I think that's actually a good point to like go into our other point about how like it's not actually like it's not the fentanyl itself, right? It's
Mhm.
like deadly. It's more just the combination of, and like how when it's like laced in something and
Mhm.
Yeah.
how that affects it. So
I know that it's most common in liquid and powder form.
Mhm.
That's what like the public knows, at least that's what we
Mhm.
know
Mm.
to be fact, is that a lot of the overdoses happen mixed with other narcotics, like
Yeah.
it could be laced in someone's cocaine or
Yeah.
someone's heroin, like it could be traces
Mhm.
of fentanyl can be in there. So it's unintentional, it's completely
Mhm.
unintentional. They think they're taking something else and they have no idea they're about to overdose,
Mhm.
But a lot of that, and we talked about it earlier, is like there is this idea that a lot of the synthetic part of the narcotics that are used is all coming from like Mexico,
Yeah.
and we talked about
Yeah,
that.
but it really isn't.
Yeah.
Colombia is actually known for producing most of the cocaine in the world.
Yeah.
And even then, in those cases, it's like it still gets blamed on Mexico and the
Right.
southern border and all of that. But really, like, southern border only makes up for like 10% of all the
Right.
fentanyl that comes into the United States.
Yeah.
Well, I will say to that, oh, it's coming from Mexico or like this and that. I think that's just kind of like a overarching like of like Latin America or South America. Like
Yeah.
oh, it's the Mexicans, but really what they
Right.
mean is just like anyone who's brown and
Yeah, I think it's definitely a lot of miseducation.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even want to say uneducation, it's miseducation because it's like you're just being taught completely incorrect information, right?
Yeah.
I was reading up on this and it's like, you hear about how in Mexico there's a lot of cartels, right?
Yeah.
And like a lot of drugs that are moving around, which is true.
Mhm.
But you realize that all of that really happens because of America. America is like kind of the cause of a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Like I'm not
Right.
even gonna lie.
No,
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's true. I think like that's something that I really wanted to touch on as well, because we mentioned earlier like that I feel like that's just an idea that a lot of people have before the fentanyl crisis
Mhm.
like skyrocketed,
Mhm.
like way before. I mean, since back in the day, like it's always like this idea that like all this cocaine is coming from Mexico, which like
Yeah.
could have some truth to it, but also like that's not the only problem. Like we need to look at
Mhm.
it in a wider lens. Like we really have to
Yeah.
consider all parties. And like Mexico, I know they have ties with China, and that's where they're getting a lot of their synthetic stuff from. So like we have to look at that too,
And then when it's not Mexico and it's like, I mean, because generally it is minorities that like suffer from these like drug epidemics. I mean, the crack epidemic from the 80s, but when it's not Mexico, it is still blaming minorities when it's like, oh,
Right.
it's black people that
Yeah.
it's doing it to themselves. You're ruining your community when it's like, okay, but where are they getting it from?
Right.
Mhm.
Because it's
Right.
not just like appearing like magic fairy dust.
I mean, you think about it, and and there are studies, and we know that things like tobacco and marijuana are more predominantly marketed towards people of color. Like,
Right.
it is
Exactly.
cheaper to get marijuana and tobacco in
Mhm.
communities of people
Absolutely.
of color.
Yeah.
So it almost makes you have to question, like, what about these heavier drugs that
Right.
are on the streets? Is that
Exactly.
also the same kind of situation?
I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same reason why, like, you see, like, more low-income communities have, a liquor store on, like, every block, and then, like, a
Right.
gun, a store to buy guns, like, on every block as well. It's just, like,
To
it's...
feed that like need. Like
exactly, yeah.
it's convenient, it's accessible, like you said, it's cheaper, like this is what, and like you kind of mentioned just now, like we have to think about these like harder drugs, these
Mhm.
more like these serious drugs, like these really important topics that like you can find this stuff in the streets, you can find it at bars or clubs, and it goes back to like I think it's worth mentioning also that like there is a big lack of awareness, health awareness, like in low-income and minority
Absolutely,
communities. And that's just because, they don't have, like, I feel like low-income communities don't have as much of a quality as, like, healthcare. Like, they don't have, like, high-quality healthcare, easy access to that, affordable access to that. So, of course, there's going to be a lack of awareness in terms of, like, health and how these drugs can potentially impact, it's just like in the moment, I feel like.
Yeah, and I also think that mental health is another big thing that's part of that too. Less access to just basic mental health needs, and just a constant feeling of like having to participate in this.
Yeah.
Is that
I agree with that. And it's like a shift that of this like idea that the opioid crisis is a white problem. I know that was a big thing, like back in the day. That was
like poor white.
Right, and that was kind of like the idea that everyone agreed to think on, and it's totally shifted. And there's just more awareness, and like these drugs and the fentanyl crisis specifically is attacking our low-income and minority communities. Like it really is. And I actually linked a BBC study and article in here, but in there the scientist who is creating this study, she literally says like, if you see billboards around the town or around the city of like the fentanyl crisis, like, oh, like it's attacking our communities, there are white people on these billboards. Like there are pictures of white people on every billboard, and I'm like, that's crazy, because it's facts, like it's literally true.
But like with that though, it's like, it's switching the narrative to where like, at the very least, like the drug epidemics, like they're getting more attention, but it's like are they for the right reasons though? Because then it's like, okay, now it's like, now that white people are going through it, now it's like actually something that they should notice, whereas like with the like crack epidemic, it was just like, oh well, we're just gonna imprison them.
Right.
And then like we'll have them deal with it on their own terms. But like I think because of the opioid epidemic, it's like okay, now white people are going through it, so like we need to take this more seriously. It's hurting our communities, it's hurting our like small towns in the US and whatever. But well, not whatever, but you know what I mean. And then now that it's with fentanyl, I think because it's a younger people problem, or like generally like younger people do go through it. It's like okay, now it's attacking your kids.
Yeah.
So then it's like the narrative is more, I don't know, appealing than just like, oh, low income minority groups are going through it. Like same old. That's at least like the general feeling I get from that.
Yeah, and I think like you can definitely see in America, at least politically, how we decided to handle this. I mean, like it was one of the main issues even brought up during the Republican debate last month. Of like, what are we doing about the fentanyl crisis? And the answer really was like basically nothing, because nothing is really happening. It's all happening on a very small community level. And a lot of people would rather levy harder punishments on drugs and things like that, which, like we said before, really only makes the outcomes worse for people, because if someone is going to use a drug, they're going to use a drug. You can't stop that. So I think it's more about the outcome of fentanyl rather than how do we prevent people from taking it.
No, I agree. I mean, I think the idea of like cracking down on this is like, I don't know how to feel about it.
Waging a war on drugs.
Like, what are we doing if we take, like, what are we actually doing, Like, exactly. That's the question of, like, let's crack down on this, okay, but, like, how, and what does that mean for us, like, as a country?
I mean, you think about it, and things like the DARE program back in the 80s were just massive failures, because they really didn't, like, you wanted to wage a war on drugs, but all you really did was make people more aware of them.
And with DARE, that's actually interesting, because, like, at the core of it, it's not a bad idea, like, the whole just say no, Nancy Reagan, but, like, it's also just, but it's not for the right reasons. Like, it almost feels like kind of, okay, well, like, it's, like, we can't do anything about it, but, like, why aren't you guys, like, actually, well, what I'm trying to say is just, like, the whole just say no argument, like, telling, like, generally black people or just, like, low-income minority groups, just, like, oh, just say no, it's, what's so hard about it? And then when it comes to the opioid epidemic, it's like a whole different, like, no, these people are sick, like, they need to get help, we need to, like,
that's a great point.
Make sure, we actually, like, give them, like, the right resources, instead of just saying, well, just say no, what's so hard?
Right.
Just say no.
And that's exactly, like, that's exactly, like, where I kind of wanted to go with that, was, like, that shift from, like, the opioid crisis is a white problem, that shift from now of, like, you know, the fentanyl crisis is attacking people of color, is attacking low-income minority communities, but like all the details within those two concepts, like that was a total like people are sick, like addiction is you know, it's all about mental health, like that's what the angle that it was at. And now and here, like we see our minority communities like really suffering in a different way, you know, like in a different way. And fentanyl specifically is like, it's just like wreaking havoc on like people of color. It's really saddening. It's really sad.
And unfortunately with fentanyl, it's like you can't say no because you don't even know that you're taking it.
Right.
It's just like, you know, it's not even a yes or no question. It's just like, oh, you're gonna do this drug you're expecting. And obviously, you know, people approach drugs their own way. You know, if you're against it, you're for it. You know, that's your own personal discretion. But like when it comes to fentanyl, it's like, you know, you really don't know. Like it could be like in anything, not even just drugs though. Like I've heard so many stories of like just people like taking normal medication or like whatever, and then it just happens to be laced with it. And at least with fentanyl though, it is more of a broad problem. Like it's not just happening to low-income minority communities, but unfortunately with that it comes like, well, it has to be a broad problem for it to be addressed more seriously. Like you have to see like, you know, the latest celebrity like die of an overdose. Like I think they just confirmed was Angus Cloud.
Angus Cloud,
like it was fentanyl. Well, it was a combination, but like I said, like, it's always a combination. So it's just like. And
that's another great point. Like we have to. Whereas like, I feel like low-income minority communities, people of color, are already screaming for help. They've already been for decades, you know, and not just the opioid crisis, just overall in general. But it takes like a whole nation to suffer to get the attention of politicians, you know.
Yeah, and you know, like we're seeing these like cherry-picked stories, like the one that was mentioned earlier about the 1-year-old, right? Yeah. And it's like these stories help convey that fact, but it's not what we really need. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like this is reported on because it's shock factor, right? But it doesn't go into the nuances of what is the actual root of this problem.
Right.
Is it this? What was it? She was a daycare.
I think it was a daycare. I might be like.
She was like.
It, but yeah.
How did that exposure happen? The question really should be like, why was someone taking this? Do you know what I mean? Like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like, and that's another thing is like, will we ever like reach a point of we've relieved the situation, we're chipping away at the severity of it? Will we ever, and how will we get there? I have no fucking clue. Like I'm literally like, it's scary because I'm like, shit, this is, I have no idea, you know? Like it's really scary to see that something that's, you know, rapidly like just spiraling into this terrible like pit of just like addiction and death, like will it ever stop? I have no idea how they're gonna fucking stop that shit, you know?
Like by history, it's really just like the way it stops is like when another drug comes along,
right?
And then that becomes the problem,
right?
And then it's like, you know, like maybe crack cocaine is not, or crack cocaine is not the same as it was in the 80s, but it's still there,
right?
And I'm sure unless something happens with it, like fentanyl will still be there, and it'll be just as. And unfortunately with fentanyl, it's unpredictable. Like you don't really know when it's going to come up, so it's just.
And I mean, it's like this isn't even just a U.S. problem either. It is permeated throughout most of Western cultures. Like it's a big issue in Canada too, but I think the difference is that Canada has a much more. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like universal healthcare,
or. I'd say a lighter take on punishments when it comes to the use of hard drugs. They do you can't be incarcerated for use of hard drugs in Canada. You don't they have centers for folks who want to do drugs to do it safely though, with like Narcan on site and you know clean needles and things like that for use, right? Like that's been around for years, but not in the US.
Side note, where is it that they do like psychedelic group therapy? It's in a European country.
It might be like an overall thing. I don't know if it's like a specific country because I've heard like different.
It's like in Norway, some shit like that. I don't know. I just thought about that.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry guys, my my little
No, but
train of thoughts.
But actually, like going off that though, like because you said there like not there's you can't get prison time for hard drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet in the U.S. you could get prison time, life sentences even for marijuana.
Oh yeah.
And there's still people who like, and I'm sure, I think like, I mean obviously marijuana's legal now, but I mean like people who were locked up like way back when and they're still in jail yet marijuana is legal.
I have a side note. I was just watching this video about this town that is on the border of Virginia and Tennessee. So it like, the state line crosses through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In Virginia, it is legal to buy and sell marijuana and use it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Tennessee, complete ban, right?
Yeah.
And there are weed shops on this street that separates the town. Like weed shops along that street.
Like a border?
Oh my God.
Yeah, and you can't walk with that shit across the border.
Yeah.
It's just
you
like
just like roll
crazy.
up a joint and then smoke
Yeah.
that shit real quick and just go back home. Like,
Look at the other person who can't do it.
Yeah,
just
you're
smoke
like-
it in front of them.
say hi to your neighbor. That shit is so funny. Oh my God. That's crazy.
Right? So it's like, and that's the thing, is that this very state by state here in California, it is completely legal to buy, sell, use marijuana.
Mm.
I don't believe we do have laws against the, like, having hard drugs on you though, right? I think still in California.
I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure. And see, like, it's a great, I feel like it's a fuzzy line too. Going back to like what we said, if you ever do need help or you're in a situation where you see someone overdosing, that fear of, oh shit, I have fucking a little bag of cocaine in my pocket, like I can't go and ask for help because then my ass is done, you know,
Yeah.
like that fear as well. Like I think we need to, as a nation, also kind of like back away from when it comes to like something like fentanyl, because like you said, you don't even know.
Yeah,
Like
you
it's
don't.
so unpredictable, you know, like I kind of move away from that like fear of, oh shit, if I say something, you know, see something, say something, but not for me because I have a fucking bag of cocaine in my pocket, like, you know? So I think that, especially in like the younger scene, like party, club, bar scene, like, and not even younger, just like that party scene, like it's so common in LA. Like I think there needs to be more of an effort to see something, say something, but for everyone, like, you know, you shouldn't feel like, oh shit, I'm gonna fucking get arrested if I ask for my buddy who's literally fucking ODing right now, you know, like, so I feel like it goes back to that as well.
And I think that's why, you know, it's great to, well, I mean, I wish like places like PCC were able to do more of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just because, like, yeah, sure, it's a community college and it's not like a college where you have like frats on on like one street and whatever, but with community colleges, it's still like LA, like it's still near, like it's still nearby, and especially with I mean, like there's nothing stopping like someone from like ODing like here, you know, like
of
you
course,
can have that anywhere. So it's just like, I mean, like people get high, like I mean, you know, it's just a thing, like people just get high like wherever, and that could include a community college. So it's like, if that happens in like say like a class or like someone's in the bathroom, it's like, well, what do you do now then?
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, just like at least like having those precautions there and like you
Right.
know, doing more than just like teaching professors how to administer Narcan, which it's a good step in the right direction, but it's also just like, well, is that required training or is it just like a seminar they go to for like one day?
Yeah,
That's that. So I don't know, but any, like closing thoughts from you guys before we wrap it
I
up?
did also just want to jump off the idea of like Narcan and like people being trained to do that. Like I take the train everywhere, right? I take the train to come to campus every day. And I know that at least LA Metro, all of their employees know how to administer Narcan, and they all have it on hand. They have it in like a little pouch on their belt. So it's like clearly there is some kind of effort in the city at least to have Narcan more readily available, but it's not enough. And I think it's very centralized to downtown as well.
And it's not even for students. Like there's a lot of, I mean, I always see homeless people or you know, people without homes in the front of like PCC, and it, you know, they don't bother anyone typically. It's just them like in the front. But with that, it's just like, you know, you don't know if like something happens to them,
Right.
And it's like, you know, if like one of the police officers or like whoever who's working on campus, like if they have the ability to like, you know, at least stop an OD from happening or like, you know, just be able to help when someone nearby like is going through it, then why not?
There's still a need for it, like in the not in PCC as a whole, but in the students who attend, the faculty who attend. There's still a need for that awareness, and like you said, like, you know, our last article was that PCC wanted to move in the direction of implementing that training, but what is that training going to consist of if it happens? Is it going to be required? Is it going to be like there will be Narcan to access anytime you need it on campus at all times? Like, is it going to look like that? Is it going to be like a seminar where, you don't have to come to this, but it's optional? Like,
yeah, exactly.
And then that raises the question of what is the future of the crisis looking like, at least to, you know, raise awareness. And not necessarily PC's not, you know, we're not going to save the world, but we need to, like, push for, hey, if you need it, we have it, like, 1,000,000%, you know?
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's important. But kind of wrapping up, I don't know if there is any resolution near at least for the U.S. for just the whole fentanyl crisis as a whole. It's scary to think about, but at the same time, like, what is that going to look like coming to a resolution, you know?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then when it's like something that's been going on for a while now, and then it becomes normalized to where it's like, oh, you know, you see like an OD, but it's just like, you know, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. And fentanyl is like that BBC article that we talked about, it is the fourth wave in the opioid crisis in America. Like, it has gotten the name of the fourth wave for a reason. And I guess, like, my question to you guys is, what do you think, like, could be like a step forward for, like, the fentanyl crisis to come to a not necessarily a close, but to come to a, you know, slowing down rate? I feel like it's just so...
I want to say that, again, more mental health awareness, but I think you can just say that in any context, which is the issue.
We all
you could put that in every single, like, school shooting.
You can put it into literally any scenario, but it's true.
Right.
The fentanyl crisis is just an extension of the mental health crisis in the United States, which does exist. It is a very big issue.
The whole opioid crisis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at it, and the same people that are ODing on fentanyl are the same groups of people that are seeing record high suicide rates in the United States. It's correlation. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, just kind of like going off of like that. I mean, I don't know if there's really an end to fentanyl. I mean, I will say with Narcan, that definitely was like, you know, a game changer in the sense that, like, at least there is a way to, you know, stop it, or not stop it, but just, you know, help in slowing it and like preventing deaths. But you know, it's kind of tricky because, like, the obvious answer is just to be like, oh, I hope politicians like do something about it, or do more than just like, oh, this is terrible, like we should do something about it, and then not do anything. But at the same time, it's just like, well, I don't know.
I mean, pushing for public changes in your community is always the first step when it comes to bigger changes, and I think that also just makes it safer for everyone in general. Yeah.
And then changing the narrative. I mean, it's not just, and not approaching it like how it was in the 80s, where it's just like, oh, just say no, and like, you know, be more mindful about the things you're taking. It's like, I could be mindful, but it's also like, I can't be mindful if I don't know what I'm taking either. So
that's true.
It's just, you know, making sure that, like, at least acknowledging like why these certain things happen, and just you know, making sure that people know that it's not, you know, one group is being affected by it or another group is being affected by it, because, like, why are we applying like race or like age to a drug overdose?
Don't villainize the people that are suffering from it.
Right, exactly. And there are, like, I feel like it's also a matter of accepting, like, hey, people are gonna try shit. People are going to experiment, especially in, like, the party scene, the nightlife scene, or whatever it is in Southern California. People are going to do it. Like you said earlier, like, you can't stop people from taking what they want to take. There are so many resources though that you can use for yourself before you decide to make that decision to try
Absolutely,
stuff.
yeah.
I know a lot of like, even like rave like outfits and clothing websites, they sell like testing strips that you can literally just buy in a pack of like 20, and you take them. I take some, I hand them out to everyone that I see taking drugs. I'm like, test your shit, like. Even, I know they're gonna take it, but test that shit before you do.
Oh yeah.
Like here's testing strips. You can there's so many resources that you can use to prevent yourself from being caught in a situation like that. So I feel like
you know what? Final thought.
No,
I didn't
good.
even realize that you could readily available testing strips were readily available. So
Yeah,
that's
you
another
can
thing.
order
It's like,
them.
I didn't even know that.
You can order them. Testing strips. There's also like testing liquids. It's crazy. Like one of my friends was like testing her unnamed substance, and but I mean, at least they're testing it, like,
Yeah,
hey, you're gonna
exactly.
take it, test that shit, like it's gonna happen, so she's testing it, she put that liquid on it, one of them like was fine, one of them the liquid turned black and it literally started smoking, like it was like smoke, and she was like,
I don't think that's
yep, that's not good.
Yeah.
So she, and that could have been a bad situation, so
Exactly.
make yourself aware, use resources that are out there. But yeah, I think that's it for me. I don't know about you guys. You guys have anything else to add?
I'm all
That's about
good.
it, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Machu, for
Thank
coming
you
on
for having
here
me,
with
guys.
us. Our first video. We'll see how it looks when we're done.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're gonna be doing a Halloween edition episode, which we'll talk about maybe more next week. But
that'd be fun.
I want to.
No,
We're gonna
don't decorate.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
gonna decorate. Yeah,
Okay.
maybe you can come back for
Oh my
Halloween.
God.
I feel like that'd be
I'd
fun.
love
That'd be
that.
fun.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So thanks guys for joining us, for listening all the way to the end.
Yeah.
See you guys next week.
Bye.